episode 33 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slawinski.
And I'm Mike Bithell.
Each week we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we're playing and or making games. Show notes. Thomas was alone for iOS 11? 11, right? That's what we're...
Yeah, we've spinal tapped it. We've taken it all the way up to 11. It's good. That was not a good joke. I'm really sorry. That was a poor start to the podcast. I've let you down.
So Thomas was alone for iOS 11 is live now. If you had issues or concerns, that should be resolved at this point.
Huzzah.
So please enjoy Thomas Was Alone on iOS 11.
Enjoy it responsibly. Moderation.
Just don't, yeah. Oh, these kids today, I'm telling you.
You see them walking down the street late at night, and they've clearly had too many rectangles with feelings in their life.
Too many friends.
Too many emotions.
Too much jumping with friends.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's sorted. Subsurface Circular continues to do really well. Thanks for everyone who's picking that up and leaving Steam reviews, especially the nice Steam reviews. Thank you. Also, the Game Dev Business Handbook.
You make it sound like there's a war. There's a great battle.
No, actually, I'm
good and bad.
No, it's incredibly positive, and thank you. The Game Dev Business Handbook is available for pre-order. Mike has now finished off that index. I'm so sorry you had to do that.
That was a horrible job that I completely brought upon myself.
I promise we won't make you do that again for any future publication things we may or may not do. Because indexing, folks, is not something apparently you ever want to do. Just if you've ever had to in the UK, do you have to write a thesis for the end of high school or anything?
We call it a dissertation usually, but yes, same idea.
Okay, so do you remember the bibliography and all that stuff on there being worse than the actual writing? That's what this was. This is indexes are like bibliographies. They're horrible. They take so much time.
It's 2,000 things you have to find in the text and then reference, and it just takes forever. Literally, it was 1,500 I think in the end references in the book that are in the index. It's crazy.
So yeah, if you enjoy if you pick up the book and you enjoy it, please feel free to send. And you really like that index.
It's a great index. It's got Ryan Reynolds in it. It's a good index.
I still can't believe that's in there.
Futter's notes were very thorough.
But yeah, index was the last part, so we are incredibly close to launching that, and more information on that very soon. Mike, what have you been playing?
I've been playing a lot of Mario and Rabbids.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah, I've been.
You liking it?
I am. It's really nice. It's smooth. It's simple. I'm a big fan of. I think I've talked about this on the podcast before. I love some of the stuff Ubisoft does in terms of like cleaning up existing mechanics. And then Nintendo are great at just putting joy into interactions. So the combination of Ubisoft and Nintendo, I'm surprised by how much it feels like a collaboration between Ubisoft and Nintendo and their kind of different design schools. It's great. It's really good. Lots to enjoy. Lots of really nice iteration on XCOM. It was the snide thing that a lot of people, myself included, I think, made the joke of have been calling it Mario XCOM forever. And it is that, but it's also done lots of things that I think a lot of people are going to go back and play XCOM and be surprised at how different it feels, and in some cases how worse it feels because some.
Well, that was the problem I had.
Oh, you've gone back to XCOM and you missed some of that Mario. Yeah.
Oh boy, I couldn't do it. I had to stop. It's that Mario and Rabbids has forever altered my viewpoint on that style of game,
which is a testament to how much they've done. I'm hitting the point now where I've finished World 2. World 2, I basically just got to the end of World 2 by just progressing. Now I'm hitting that kind of thing where it's I'm gonna have to grind a bit, which is a bit. So
annoying. Is that what the designers are getting uppity about? Because I've definitely seen a couple game developers who or game designers who are unhappy with the back half of that game. Is that because the progression is weird?
Yeah, I've heard it gets people stuck and it becomes a bit like a a job.
It does.
It becomes a bit worky, which for the first 2 worlds I didn't feel at all. I just bombed through them. I got better at the game. I leveled up my characters as I went, and it was all gravy. And now I've hit a point where I think either I've gotten worse at the game, or I'm not understanding something, or I just need to grind.
So it's funny, if you had done any of the co-op levels, right? Even if you do the first world co-op level, it becomes very clear that you're just underpowered for doing that. So you actually do need to go back to the previous world and do the secret world inside of like World 1 and do some of the challenges so you get enough money and enough experience to level up the characters.
Interestingly, I've got too much money. I've already, after World 2, I've gotten to that kind of Assassin's Creed level where it's like there's just more money than I can spend. Yeah.
I always needed cash.
Oh, in terms of like buying guns, like I can just, at any point where I feel like my guns are underpowered, I can just go into the store and buy the 3 best guns for the characters I've got. Like something about, I guess I've been doing a lot of the side, like finding the crates, doing the hidden stuff as I've gone. So maybe that's why I've got lots of cash. It's the what they call the skill tree stuff.
Correct.
That's where I'm feeling the economy is poorer, but that's, it's fine, and I'm having a great time. My only fear is actually with that grind is because of the pace of leveling up, and this is designing Facebook games for a while. kind of I know exactly what this is, but you go back to like earlier levels and they're not fun because you can just kill everything in one shot. So I'm finding up till the end of World 2, it was just handing me the fun on a silver platter and kind of patting me on the head as it thanked me for my time. Now I've hit this point where I'm having to work for the fun, and that's fine, but it's a different pace it kind of hits. All that said, I'm really enjoying it. And there's some great design lessons in there, most of which I kind of want to keep to myself because I think they're there. I think a lot of people have missed some of the really clever design in there, so I kind of want to steal it.
And now it's time for what's going on at the studio, and we're close to launching the Game Dev Business Handbook. Probably should have Futter on in the next couple weeks.
Yep.
When that happens, and have him talk about that, because he's also been doing some blog posts in the meantime,
which are neat. They're really nice. I've been having a look at some of those.
Thank you. Genuinely.
The thank you there implies that I very rarely kind of give respect and credit to you guys. I like to think that I often say nice things about the team. But this this one, it's really nice. I don't think we've talked about the blog. I think
we haven't at all, which is why like for that reaction
focused on other things. But yeah, it's great. It's really good.
Yeah, no, he's been doing a really solid job on that, and providing extra information that it's covered in the book, but it's sort of it's sort of getting that initial concept in. And then the book details it even more.
I think it's a good taster, isn't it? It's a good way of people kind of gauging whether the book is going to be about the stuff they would be interested in. That kind of, if you look at the blog that he set up and you're seeing stuff that you're like, this is interesting, this is useful, I wish I'd known this 6 months ago, that kind of thing, then maybe the book's for you. I like it as a...
No, then the book is definitely for you.
Yeah.
Like if you're reading those blog posts and you're thinking, okay, I get this, but I wish I had a little bit more. Than the book is definitely.
Anyway, we need to move on. This is all getting a little bit shopping channel.
Okay, sorry.
That necklace looks amazing on you, Alexander. Is that real? Are those real diamonds? Why, yes, they are, Mike. They're brilliant. They're great. They're sorry, Carol.
You
hello.
Have been busy getting ready for the next thing.
The next thing.
So that's we're wrapping up.
Pre-production. Woo.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about pre-production yet, or are we going to save that for a little?
I mean, at the moment, it's really... Yeah, I mean, obviously, to give any kind of details...
Do you still have that call-out, by the way, for portfolios and stuff? Is that still out there?
That one's winding down. I think we found a couple of interesting kind of people we're going to be talking to. So, yeah, we were trying to fill a gap for a character artist. I
think next time we should make sure that we mention it on here, too. That's one of those things we should. we definitely divide our podcast life and our Twitter life.
It's something we separate. I think actually recruitment would be a really interesting thing to do a deep dive on sometime, because I don't think I'm very good at it. It's something I want to get better at, and I think actually, like, I think we know lots of things, but I think also actually there's room for improvement on that. And I think it'll be an interesting podcast to talk about kind of what we do right and where I think we're a bit weak.
Yeah, I mean, most of our issues have to do with timing, because
most of your issues have to do with timing. Most of my issues have to do with lots of other things. There's an interesting anyway, we'll talk about it on a longer segment at some point. But yeah, so
okay, go on. Well, no, then the last sort of thing I want to talk about, because you brought it up, you did bring it up on the Twitters. I want to take a moment on this Clare Balding thing.
That's interesting, isn't it?
It is interesting.
Do you know of Clare Balding? Is Clare Balding someone who because I know you're spending a lot of time on BBC iPlayer since you moved over.
So I'm aware of Clare Balding.
I used to live next door to her.
Due to her being the highest paid, or second highest paid. She's part of the BBC payment.
I think she's definitely, like, you mean amongst women, right? Because I think most of the top slots,
Winkleworth was the highest.
Claudia Winkleman is the highest, I think, and then I think she's a close second.
So anyway, the reason I want to bring this up, it's the Clare Balding thing. One, because it's so W1A, which, by the way, if you live in the States, is available on Netflix. W1A.
I love W1A. It's one joke over and over and over, but I love the commitment they have to doing one joke. It's great.
Season 3 just started here in the UK, and it's a show I cannot believe they allow to exist, but somehow it does.
The BBC has to be simultaneously, like, doing weird stuff, but also the BBC is very self-deprecating as an organization. So I think there's a lot of people at BBC who enjoy watching that show. And also there's one character in it who I'm pretty sure I've met the person they're based on, even down to like the wardrobe choices that are, I'm not going to say who it is because I'll give it away, but like there is one character on there who is definitely someone I know or someone I've met in the past. And it's really weird to me because it's a brilliant caricature of that person and I don't know if they know. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
So I want to touch on this because it's definitely a W1A thing, and because it's something we touch. Oh, see, here we go again. Something we touch on in the book. I swear I'm not doing this intentionally.
Which book's that, Alexander?
The Game Dev Business Handbook.
That sounds like a great book. That sounds like a great book. I was hanging out at this cool friend of mine's house the other day, and I noticed on their shelf was a copy of the Game Dev Business Handbook, and I thought to myself, wow, first of all, how did they get a copy? Second of all, I guess they're just that cool that they wanted a copy early. The Game Dev Business Handbook coming soon. I wanted to touch on it because it's in there, and also because a portion of the audience that listens to this podcast are in their late teens and early 20s, and can you remember that, Alexander?
Huh?
Can you remember being in your late teens, early 20s? It was amazing.
It was pretty cool.
It was so good. Sorry, carry on. I'm going to derail everything you say. I'm in that kind of mood today. I apologize. Carry on.
But I think it's important to them because even though journalism has sort of gone off the rails the last few years and become a place where there's no career there, then it might turn around again by the time they're in their late 20s, early 30s, and they might actually have to deal with this concept that came up again. So what ended up happening was that Clare Balding, who is a celebrity here.
She's a sports presenter, is what she does. And she's kind of the sports presenter. She's very, very highly respected. Mainly, I know her for tennis, but I think she does lots of other sports as well. But yeah, she is. If she were in America, she would be one of the big names on an ESPN or something like that.
Yeah, and what ended up happening was that she did an interview for a magazine with a reporter, and apparently
Saga, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what that is? Because I don't have the cultural context.
Saga is, to my knowledge, it's like it's a kind of a lifestyle kind of magazine, but specifically targeted kind of older women. So it's kind of it's very much, and this came across in the, I think it's an interesting subtext for the story, because you've read the Guardian piece, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Where it's like there's some stuff there about her wanting to downplay the fact she's a lesbian. There's stuff in there about kind of her wanting to like big up the BBC, and it's just interesting that I think a lot of this came from an insecurity and wanting to tailor to an older female audience in the UK. It's just an interesting subtext, interesting context to the article. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so that happened. So essentially, the short version of a much longer story here is that the interview subject requested full rights to alter the copy, the text of the article. Not only that, they actually did alter the text of the article, added their own commentary or quotes afterwards, to the point where the reporter asked to have her name taken off of the piece. And yeah, that's a thing that didn't used to happen. It used to be you would do an interview and whatever came out of it. And we are in a weird sort of in-between place right now, where, you know, even someone who's been in the game for a long, long time apparently thinks that the rules have changed enough that they can request editorial control, for lack of a better term. But you brought it up on Twitter, and I was sort of curious your reasons for bringing it up.
I brought it up. So in this specific case, it's obviously someone, like you say, who's very experienced, long career, represented by a PR firm. They know what they were doing, and they knew that they were, if not crossing a line, playing with a line. As you say, like, I think, you know, the role of the press and kind of the blurring of that and PR probably has led to some ambiguities where this kind of thing can happen. And I'm not going to jump on necessarily and say this is evil, but like, she should have known better. But why I shared it, no, I know that wasn't what you were saying either. Why I shared it was because I'm pretty sure I made that mistake early in my career. I can't remember the details, but it's one of those things that until a journalist pointed out to me, because I've got no journalism background, I don't know how journalism works. Until someone pointed out to me that was wrong, and, you know, you take 2 minutes to think about it, and very obviously it's an issue, right? I think it was. I think there was an interview very early on in my career. I think I did an interview. This would probably have been around Thomas Was Alone, even. And I think I said a turn of phrase or something that I didn't like in retrospect. Classic thing. I'm sure when you were on the press side, I'm sure this happened a lot, right? I slipped. I said something, I think it was either about like a future game I wanted to work on. I might have accidentally kind of nodded towards what I was doing with Volume or something like that. And I remember kind of asking the journalist, like, can I just have a quick look over that? Or can we tweak that or whatever? And being genuinely surprised when the journalist very politely told me to f*** off. And, you know, and in retrospect, yeah, it was a very rookie mistake, very stupid. I wasn't trying to manipulate the media. I didn't realize what I was asking necessarily. So I think it's something that's worth repeating. I think as these lines grey, and they are clearly greying, I see my Twitter often as somewhere I can kind of put stuff for that, you know, for the young developer who's kind of finding their path. Just, you know, if that makes one person not make themselves look foolish in front of a journalist, I'll be very happy.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned that it's cyclical, right? Because at some point, I'm guessing we will go back to the old rules and the way things worked before. But in the meantime, my sort of advice would be to younger devs is at least if you can't get external media training, right? At least media train yourself. At least know what you're saying when you're saying it, instead of just thinking that they're not your friends. They're not your friends. You're there to represent. You are there to represent your game and yourself.
And hey, that's an easy mistake to make, right? Like, I've definitely fallen into that trap of thinking of a games journalist like as a buddy, and being, you know, genuinely, like, personally upset if they wrote something about me that I didn't like. And it's a trap that's very easy to fall into. We're colleagues, you know, we're professionals. But again, like, you know, there are lots of games journalists who also make games now. There are lots of game journalists. There are lots of game developers who also write for websites. Like, there's a lot of this kind of grey stuff, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's kind of natural, and it will happen. But yeah, this was a nice timely reminder of where those lines are, or at least where they used to be, as you say. I think it's a larger issue than video games, right? Like, we're in an era where journalism and news is in a tough place. There are lots of challenges on lots and lots.
But it is funny that you mentioned, you know, the game journalists moving on. Like, you know, you've got Divinity Original Sin written by one, and it's like one of the GameSpot's only, like, what is it, 1 of 16 10 out of 10 games.
Is that right?
Like,
I didn't see that. Yeah. I mean, the journalist I saw doing well this week was Tom Francis with Heat Signature, who is now, he's 2 for 2 in terms of like really great games. And that's not to be underestimated. That's really impressive. And yeah, he's a very cool guy as well. But it is happening, and there are these transitions taking place, and that's a cool thing. I think there's lots that game dev can learn from journalism, and journalism can learn from game dev. I think the more we talk, the better. But yes, this was an interesting kind of case study in getting it wrong. And yeah, so that's why I shared it. That's why I retweeted that.
1, 2, 3. I wanna thank you for reading the mail again. Thank you for reading the mail again.
Dear Mike, aka Mr. Bithell,
nice,
and Alexander, not aka Alex. Firstly, I just want to say
that's a good level of research on the part of the emailer. That's good. Yeah. You've appealed to our egos very quickly in the email. We are ready to help. Good email.
Firstly, I just want to say I really enjoyed the podcast, especially the, quote, non-sexy episodes, as they do cover the topics of a lot of aspiring game devs don't want to think about, even though they need to. So keep up the good work.
Awesome.
There. My question follows a topic from your show the other week when someone asked about approaching a publisher for support. You mentioned that in today's world, a prototype is more or less mandatory. My multi-part question is in regards to the rest of that conversation. Part 1.
Nice.
Dum dum.
Episode 1, a clearing. 3 knights watchmen run through, surrounded by snow. They're pursued by something, but we don't see what. Carry on. I don't know why I decided to do Game of Thrones there. Carry on.
I was about to say, that's the Game of Thrones opening, isn't it?
It is. It's fine.
Part 1. When building a pitch for a publisher or other investor, what else would be important to present along with the prototype? A project plan? Design documents? I'm currently building mine for my current project as I feel it will help me focus.
Yes. I mean, whatever the basically what answers the question, should we give this person money? like if something gives, so I mean, we can go through ours, right? So what we with our last round of pitching, which was successful, but you know, has hit some fun and games since then. So we'll see how that goes. That was a prototype.
Yep.
Which was about 5 minutes of kind of core gameplay stuff. I mean, core to the game, not core as in audience, but like it was telling players what the game was going to be, and you could play it, and you could put your hands on it, and you could control it, and that's what to me a prototype kind of should be. Then there was a pitch document, which I think was like, what was it, about 20 pages, something like that, which was a lot of great concept artists from the.
Was it really 20 pages?
I feel like it was 20 pages. Yeah. Maybe actually no, it sounds too high now. Maybe 15.
That's way too
maybe
high.
15. It was quite a substantial document. That was for a pitch doc. So that was concept art, and that was very kind of focused on gameplay, on kind of story background, but also just kind of theming, kind of setting a tone. That was very much the kind of how we would expect, like giving them the beats of like, what's the trailer going to have in it? What's going to be the world we're creating here? What's the box art going to kind of accomplish? We didn't do mock-ups of any of that stuff, but kind of those are the kind of questions, the kind of the creative vision. You've got the gameplay here and the proof that we can make it. You've got the vision and the artistic kind of creative direction in the pitch doc. Then on your side, spreadsheets, right? Like you've got the whole kind of business plan, documentation. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I kept it really concise. For the most part, this is the top level stuff. So it's just a breakdown of the different departments, and by departments, I mean, design, art, that type of stuff. Not, we're still talking about independent development here. Like, no one's expecting you to have the full sort of spreadsheet. They might ask for it at some point. But no, where this is top level, just these are what the different groups are going to cost and why they're going to cost this. And some higher level publishers might ask for man month hours, and there is a calculation that goes along with that. And I highly recommend, rather than me trying to explain that here, that you specifically ask them how they do their calculation and base it off of that, because there is no standardization. Each publisher has a different way of calculating that. And until the industry has some form of standardization, you're better off just asking directly and going from there. So yes, prototype, PDF, pitch document, budget breakdown, that was it?
I think so. And then obviously we were prepared and could give kind of, I gave what would I give in the room, like a 10-minute kind of explanation and walkthrough of what the game was, showed the game, worked them through some of the documentation, showed them what we were making. And then just being kind of the, remember all that job interview stuff you remember from being taught in secondary school, right? Like presenting yourself well. But basically, yeah, your job in a pitch is to answer the question, should we give this person money and or marketing and or our reputation?
Yeah, and if you have a partner, definitely bounce that off of each other, because it's very, you can easily ask each other the questions that are the traps, or just the things that you're not that clear about.
Yeah, and we did that, didn't we? I think you kind of played aggressive executive in various role play kind of scenarios. The other thing that helps us is that was my first kind of job in industry, I was a pitch guy. So producing materials for pitches and stuff. They occasionally sent me off to pitch, but I wasn't very good at it back then. So I was making stuff back in the office, and then other slicker people were presenting it to executives.
Part 2. At what stage of development is a sensible time to actually approach a publisher for support? I myself am currently already working full-time, so just building the prototype will take a long while. Is approaching a publisher for potential financial support the right idea to help fund working on a game full-time?
Do you want me to...
That's a
complicated one.
That's a complicated
So let's go back to the executive we're imagining. This person has a certain amount of money they're allowed to spend every year, and your job is to convince them that you should get a little piece of that money. And you're up against everyone else who wants a bit of their money. So your challenge is basically to do better than it's the how do you outrun a polar bear, have a slow friend. It's that with pitches. It's basically your job is not necessarily to be the best game in the world, or the best pitch in the world, but to be good enough that you get into the pile of stuff that he puts money into. So, all of that said, you should present at the time where you think you've got the best chance. I would say with pitching, it should be as late as you can without being silly. The other thing to bear in mind is if you're working full time, if that job is not in games, that's going to make that's maybe an indicator that you need to do a lot more before you'll get funding, simply because if you're not working in games, you haven't shipped other games that you've been in charge of, even if you're just working on other people's games, then it's a much harder sell to a publisher. When we walk into a room with a publisher, we can point to, I don't know how many games we release now, quite a few, that we can point to, and
it gets easier every time.
And it does get easier because we can competently present ourselves as people who have shipped games. That's something that you won't have the benefit of if you've not done it. So therefore, you have to be awesome in other areas, and the game is probably going to be the part that speaks for that. So I would suggest, if you're working full time, to continue working on your prototype until it's really great, and then to approach publishers.
Part 3.
Yeah.
If you are finally lucky enough to convince a publisher to listen to your crazy idea, how would you approach the conversation, negotiation of support? I know that is a bit of a tough question, as every publisher is going to be different, but I'm curious as to some of the ways those conversations could go. And then part 3B is, assuming part of the negotiation with the publisher is about funding, how do you go about costing development? Okay, so 3B we'll get to in a second. So let's do
3B is like 3 podcasts.
Yeah, 3B
we'll do
is
a quick version of that. I mean, basically the conversation is you presenting the game and you telling them how much it'll cost and you telling them why they're the people who should publish it. Because that's a big part of it, right? Is finding publishers. They're not just money and marketing. They are, you're buying into a specific brand. You know, if I go to a publisher, if I have a conversation with Devolver, that's going to be a very different conversation, a very different game than if I go and talk to Ubisoft. And I've talked to both of them about different things in the past. And those are different conversations about very different kinds of games. Like, it's a very different kind of scope of project, a very different style of project. So you do need to find publishers and talk to them about what they can bring to it as well. But then, yeah, it's just a conversation really about what you're making and making sure that, you know, you don't get kind of screwed on a deal, which is something that Alex and I can go into with the budgeting. But ultimately, their job is to find cool stuff. If you've got cool stuff and you can present it well, then you're most of the way there.
Yeah, for part 3A here, mostly you're dealing with a biz dev person or an executive, and it's top level. It's very like, is the project that you are presenting align with their portfolio? And one of the things that absolutely frustrates me is I've now heard several times someone being like, oh, you know, we don't have a portfolio. We just want to do like cool stuff.
That's always a lie.
Right. That is a lie. That is a total lie.
Haven't we've been in situations, again, being very careful to not name anyone, but we've been in situations where we've been told that.
Correct.
Proceeded, and then 2 months later, oh, you know, this now doesn't fit the portfolio. It's like, well, you don't have portfolios. You just follow, you know, it's always, yeah, there's some dishonesty and creativity, shall we say. Creativity.
Yeah, so recognize a publisher's portfolio. I cannot stress that enough. And yes, there will be some publishers who have incredibly artsy portfolios. Annapurna's a really solid example of this. And then there are, developers that have more specific portfolios. But definitely look at that when you are having that conversation, because if you have a really great meeting with a publisher, and this is something I kind of had to get over myself. You can have a really great meeting with a publisher, and they're like, yeah, this is great, let's do this, everything's cool, and you realize that like what you're pitching, it doesn't really fit what they do. No. And yet they seem to be really into it, and then, you know, when of course it doesn't work out, you can't take that to heart. It's not a... Oh,
it's brutal. I think if you got emotionally kind of involved in every pitch, that's a really good point, is be prepared. You know, be prepared that 99% of the people you pitch to are not going to want to buy your game. And that's true. I mean, that's true once you get to the marketplace as well. But like,
99.8% of people will not want to buy your game in the market.
If we got 1% of the population, we'd be fine. That would be lovely.
If we got 1% of the population, no.
We'd have an island. We'd live on an island. We'd have 2 islands next to each other, and we'd Skype each other from our separate islands every day.
Yeah. That's the thing that I swear we should go down this road sometime. This is not the time, but when we are talking about the marketplace and we're talking about the market, even if you had an indie game that even got 1% of the market, one measly percent, Mike's right. You could own an island. Like you would have an island. We are not talking about high percentages here. We are talking about fractions of a percentage. That's what survival is. So survival is fractions of a percentage. So part 3B, do you simply estimate the time of development, what each team member's salary, and how do you go about costing development? So you break it down by department. If you have somehow received investment, or if you're looking for a larger investment, you do have to factor in the true cost of an employee, and that is incredibly dependent on where you are located. That's if you decide to do full time with equity and everything like that. However,
explain what you mean by true cost.
True cost is if I'm hiring a new full time person, and they very lovingly do it for $30,000 a year, then I have to add the cost of their pension and their national insurance in the case of the UK, and other elements on top of that. So their true cost is actually about $38,000, maybe even $39,000, rather than just the salary.
Yeah, that trips people up a lot in terms of...
Yeah, it's... And I'm being very careful and specific here, because this changes not only by what country you're in, but if you're in the United States, by what state you're in. So the true cost of an employee can fluctuate radically depending on where you're. Now that's a full-time person. In terms of the part-time or the contract employee, yes, it's much more clean and specific in terms of what the numbers on that are. However, pretty much most publishers will tell you to add 10 to 20% on top of your pitch or your funding expectations. Yeah. And that's kind of a known thing. They might even tell you point blank. Like, I've absolutely been in situations where someone has told me to like add 20% onto that, and I was like, I already did. They're like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, it's breaking it down by department, knowing exactly what the costs are, and do you simply estimate the time of development and what each team member's salary would be, and then on unexpected costs? Yeah, that's really like you need to put all the money out there, and hopefully you don't go over that, because that's a conversation you don't want to have. Appreciate there's a lot to dissect here. Be grateful if you could tackle even a small amount of it. Regards, Adam. P.S. Just want to say it was nice to meet Mike in person at EGX this year. Really nice guy, very patient. Even if you did break my game. Did you break someone's game?
I do tend to do that. I can't recall which game I broke. I played a few games at EGX, but sorry, Adam. Good luck with it. I mean, if you're demoing at EGX, you're already doing well. Like, that's already impressive, and that's, that will go a long way. Don't be afraid to point that out to publishers in those meetings. That you're someone who can demonstrate your game, that you've been to events, that I broke your game and I don't remember that, which means you covered it up well or distracted me sufficiently afterwards. You did a good job there.
PPS, Alexander, hope you enjoyed your first EGX. I did. It was really nice. And yeah, I think we mentioned this on last week's show, but a lot of talent in that indie group. A lot of young, really talented folks. Which
scares you, right? You get worried about that. I think it's great.
No, see, I'm more scared of it because I think there is legitimacy to what you've expressed in having been part of a machine for several years and then going out.
Oh, that they haven't got that experience of kind of knowing the quote unquote right way to do it before they do their own thing. Yeah, that's true.
And I'm absolutely, another reason for the book. But another reason for the book is having conversations at EGX with some of those folks, and they are walking, some of the stuff that they would say is just walking straight into a trap.
To be clear, traps that probably I walked into as well. Like, right, that's I want to be very careful that we don't present ourselves as like having been far cleverer than these young whippersnappers. I think the thing is we can pass on the learning from.
I think you were also protected when you fell into those traps, like
just by the time, just that it was an easier time. That's probably true.
You know, there was a corporate, or just a company.
Oh,
layer.
you mean when I was in a big company? I see.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, no, I was. I was only nearly fired a couple of times from my career.
But that's the thing is that.
But yeah, if I'd done that on Twitter publicly, then
exactly. Yeah. That's my concern. Yeah. You know, some of the things was.
This makes me out to be actually. Sorry, I just realized that sounds like I did something absolutely terrible. I didn't do anything absolutely terrible. I was a little bit lazy and arrogant in my early career. Carry on.
But no, it's they're walking. They could easily walk into traps that there's no one to protect them because it's them and the public. There's no layer in between them to learn and make mistakes and figure things out. It's just if they make a mistake, they're going to make a mistake in a public
on
forum.
Stage, yeah,
and that's a much larger conversation for another time. But there is absolutely a ton of talent out there, and I wish them all the best. But I also know that some of the things that were said, I'm like, oh, you can't do that, or you can't say that. It's going to get you in trouble. Maybe not today, but definitely tomorrow.
Were these conversations I wasn't around for, or these ones we'll have to gossip after we've recorded?
No. I mean, yeah, you weren't there for most of them, but
I'm intrigued as to what people have said to you, because I've had a lot of those. Yeah, you unfortunately do hear a lot of stupid stuff. Anyway,
it's another show, another time.
Yeah,
we'll certainly get to it. If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just on the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithelGames.com, through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging @MikeBithell or @Slewinski. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downen. We'll be back next week. I'm Alexander Slewinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike.
Laboratory.